Please, everybody, have a seat. Good afternoon. I am delighted to welcome my friend and partner, President Calderón, back to the White House. I want to discuss our meeting today and then address the situation in Libya. President Calderón was last here, along with the First Lady, Senora Zavala, for a very productive state visit last spring. A visit that reflected the new era of respect and cooperation and partnership between our two countries. We've since worked together as global partners at the G20 summits in Toronto and Seoul and at the APEC summit in Yokohama. And I very much appreciate President Calderón being here today to deepen the cooperation that is so essential to the prosperity and security of both of our countries. Of course, the relationship between the United States and Mexico isn't measured just in the partnership between two presidents. It's evident every day in the strong bonds between our two societies. It's the thousands of people who work together at every level, federal, state, and community levels, to keep our citizens safe, to keep our economies growing. It's the tens of thousands of students and teachers and researchers and exchanges between our schools and our universities. It's the 1 million people who cross our shared border every day, tourists and business people, sustaining one of the largest trading relationships in the world. And it's our families and our friends, the many Americans living in Mexico, and the tens of millions of Mexican Americans who make outstanding contributions to this country every single day. As I said, we're also global partners. As part of the G20, we're advancing the global economic recovery, and I look forward to visiting Mexico when President Calderón hosts the G20 next year. Together, we've responded to the earthquake in Haiti, and we're securing the world's vulnerable nuclear materials. I especially want to commend President Calderón for Mexico's successful leadership of the Cancun conference, including progress towards a green fund that he himself helped to get started and champion, and which will help developing countries adapt to climate change. Most recently, our governments have spoken out forcefully for the human rights of the Libyan people, and Mexico played a leading role at the United Nations in suspending Libya from the Human Rights Council. So, President Calderón, this not only reflects our commitment to the shared values of freedom and justice and rule of law, it's also another example of Mexico's global leadership. As you said in your address to our Congress last year, that Mexico is standing tall and ready to take its rightful place in the world. It is this appreciation of the great bonds between Americans and Mexicans and the values and responsibilities that we hold in common that allowed us to make progress once again today. We're working to expand the trade that creates jobs for our peoples. Remember, Mexico is the second largest market for American exports. It supports some 1 million American jobs. And our exports to Mexico are growing faster than they are with the rest of the world. So we're moving ahead with plans for a 21st century border so people and goods can cross securely and efficiently. We're working to coordinate and streamline regulations and get rid of unnecessary trade barriers to make it easier to do business together. We're making new investments in clean energy partnerships, including green buildings and smart grid technologies. And based on negotiations so far, I'm hopeful that we can conclude an agreement by the end of the year to develop new sources of energy in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm especially pleased to announce that after nearly 20 years, we finally have found a clear path to resolving the dispute over trucking between our two countries. I thank President Calderón and his team, as well as my Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood and our U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Ron Kirk for reaching this proposed agreement. I look forward to consulting with Congress and moving forward in a way that strengthens the safety of cross-border trucking, lifts tariffs on billions of dollars of U.S. goods, expands our exports to Mexico, and creates jobs on both sides of the border. We're also deepening our cooperation against the drug cartels that threaten both our peoples. As I've said before, President Calderón and the Mexican people have shown extraordinary courage in the fight for their country. Tens of thousands of Mexicans innocent citizens and dedicated security forces have lost their lives. I have reaffirmed to President Calderón that in this cause, Mexico has a full partner with the United States. Because whether they live in Texas or Tijuana, our people have a right to be safe in their communities. So we are continuing to speed up the delivery of equipment and training that our Mexican partners need to keep up this fight. As President Calderón cracks down on money laundering in Mexico, we're putting unprecedented pressure on cartels and their finances here in the United States. And we thank our Mexican partners for their close cooperation following the murder of one of our immigration and customs agents, Special Agent Jamie Zapata. I reiterated that the United States accepts our shared responsibility for the drug violence. So to combat the southbound flow of guns and money, we are screening all southbound rail cargo, seizing many more guns bound for Mexico, and we are putting more gun runners behind bars. And as part of our new drug control strategy, we are focused on reducing the demand for drugs through education, prevention, and treatment. We have also discussed immigration, an issue on which both countries have responsibilities. As I told President Calderón, I remain deeply committed to fixing our broken immigration system with comprehensive reform that continues to secure our borders, enforces our laws, including against businesses that break the law, and requiring accountability from undocumented workers. And we have to conduct this debate in a way that upholds our values as a nation of both laws and immigrants. So I'm eager to work with Republicans and Democrats to get this reform done, which is vital to the U.S. economy. Finally, I'm looking forward to receiving insights from the President as I prepare for my trip to Latin America this month, which will be an opportunity to strengthen our security cooperation throughout the region. Mr. President, thank you for your partnership and for deepening the bonds between our countries, which only grow stronger each time that we meet. Now, before I turn it over to President Calderón, I want to address the situation in Libya. The United States and the entire world continues to be outraged by the appalling violence against the Libyan people. The United States is helping to lead an international effort to deter further violence, put in place unprecedented sanctions to hold the Gaddafi government accountable, and support the aspirations of the Libyan people. We are also responding quickly to the urgent humanitarian needs that are developing. Tens of thousands of people from many different countries are fleeing Libya, and we commend the governments of Tunisia and Egypt for their response, even as they go through their own political transitions. I have therefore approved the use of U.S. military aircraft to help move Egyptians who have fled to the Tunisian border to get back home to Egypt. I've authorized USAID to charter additional civilian aircraft to help people from other countries find their way home. And we're supporting the efforts of international to the Libyan border so that they can work with the United Nations, NGOs, and other international partners inside Libya to address the urgent needs of the Libyan people. Going forward, we will continue to send a clear message. The violence must stop. Muammar Gaddafi has lost legitimacy to lead, and he must leave. Those who perpetrate violence against the Libyan people will be held accountable. And the aspirations of the Libyan people for freedom, democracy, and dignity must be met. President Calderón.
Gracias, Presidente Obama. Muchísimas
Thank you
gracias
very
por su
much,
hospitalidad.
President Obama. Thank you so much for your
Señoras y
hospitality.
señores de los medios de
Ladies and
comunicación, muy
gentlemen
buenas
of
tardes.
the media, good
El presidente
afternoon.
Barack Obama
President
y yo
Barack
hemos sostenido
Obama and
una
I
muy valiosa
have
conversación
held a very
sobre el estado que
valuable
guarda la
conversation
cooperación bilateral
concerning
en
the
muchos
status
aspectos.
of our
Ha sido, como
bilateral
siempre,
cooperation
una gran
and many
satisfacción
aspects of this. As
personal el
always,
confirmar
it has
que
been very
coincidimos en el principio
satisfying
básico
for
de
me to see
corresponsabilidad.
that we agree
Yo
on the basic
agradezco esta
principle
oportunidad,
of
señor
co-responsibility.
Presidente,
And
para
I
poder
thank you,
platicar
Mr.
con usted
President,
en
for
esta
your
ciudad de
invitation
Washington.
to hold this working visit here in
De
the
las
city of
cosas que
Washington.
evaluamos es que nuestros
Some of the
gobiernos
things that
llevan
we
ya un
evaluated is that
importante
our
camino avanzado
governments
en
have
diferentes
progressed
materias. Los
substantially
resultados
on many of
de
these
nuestra
aspects. The
cooperación,
results of our
en
cooperation
algunos asuntos una
in
cooperación
some
sin precedentes,
aspects, unprecedented
se han traducido
cooperation,
en ejemplos
have been
concretos,
translated
como la
into
apertura el año
concrete
pasado,
examples, such as the
2010,
opening last
de
year
los
in
3 primeros
2010 of
nuevos
the 3
cruces fronterizos,
first
los primeros en
new
10 años.
border crossings
Mi visita de Estado el
over
año
the past 10
pasado,
years.
como usted ya lo ha
My state
mencionado,
visit
señor
last year, as you
presidente,
mentioned, Mr. President,
y las constantes
and
reuniones
the
que
ongoing
hemos tenido, las
meetings
que habremos de tener
that
en
we
el
have
futuro
held and that we
inmediato
will
fueron
continue to have in
especialmente
the immediate
importantes
future have
también en
been
nuestra relación
especially
bilateral
important to
para
our
generar la
bilateral
confianza
relationship so
que
as
hoy
to
tenemos.
generate confidence, the
Ahora
confidence that we
sabemos
have
que
today.
debemos seguir
We know
personalmente
today that we
involucrados para
need to
asegurar el
continue
alcance
to
de los
be
objetivos que nos
personally
hemos
involved
trazado
so as to
y que
ensure
revisamos
that
el día de
the
hoy.
objectives that we trace
Hemos
are
abordado
reached, such as
principalmente las
those
siguientes
dealt with
temáticas.
today, and
Primero,
we have broached the following
en
subjects
materia
today.
internacional,
First,
hemos reiterado que
internationally,
México y
at the
Estados
international
Unidos
level,
son
we
unos
have
auténticos
reiterated that
socios
Mexico and the United
estratégicos,
States are authentic
como lo
strategic
demuestra nuestro
partners,
trabajo
as can be
conjunto en
seen
la
by our
agenda
joint work
global y
on the
regional.
global and
Hemos
regional
logrado avances
agendas.
sustantivos,
We
como
have
nos ha
achieved
comentado
substantive
el presidente Obama, en la atención de temas
progress,
como el
as
cambio
mentioned by
climático
President Obama,
durante
in
la
matters such
COP16,
as climate change
y ahora nos
during the
esforzamos
Conference of the
juntos
Parties
en
number
hacer
16, and now we
operativos los
have
acuerdos de
made
Cancún y
efforts
adoptar los pasos
to
siguientes en la
have
COP17 en Sudáfrica.
to make the
Ambos
agreements
países
reached in
también tenemos un
Cancún
papel muy
operational
importante
and
al
as well as
interior
to
del
adopt
G20,
the next steps for
mecanismo
the
que
Conference of the
México
Parties number 17
presidirá
in
el año
Durban.
entrante,
Both countries
en el
will
que se han
also play
alcanzado
an
acuerdos
important
muy
role within the
importantes que han
G20, the
contribuido a la
mechanism that Mexico
estabilidad
will be presiding
y la
over next year,
recuperación de la
and in
economía
which we have reached
internacional.
important agreements
En
for
este
stability
contexto,
and recovery
he
of the
felicitado
international economy.
al
And in this
presidente Obama por
context,
su
I would like to
decisión de visitar
congratulate President
dentro de unas
Obama for
semanas
the
Brasil,
visit that he will
Chile
be
y El
making to
Salvador.
Brazil, Chile, and El
Un
Salvador
mayor
in a
diálogo
few
entre
weeks'
Estados
time.
Unidos y las naciones
Greater
latinoamericanas
dialogue
será
among the United
siempre
States and
benéfico
Latin
para el
American nations will
hemisferio y
always
benéfico
be
también no
beneficial
solo
to the
para los
hemisphere
países
and
latinoamericanos,
beneficial not
sino
just
para
for Latin
Estados
American
Unidos.
countries, but also
En
for
el
the
caso
United States.
específico de
The specific
Centroamérica,
case
además,
of Central
acordamos
America,
seguir
in addition,
trabajando con el
here
gobierno
we've
americano
agreed
para
to
lograr
continue
una
to work with the
cooperación
U.S.
cada vez
government
más
so
decidida
as to
en
achieve
apoyo a los
more
esfuerzos
determined
regionales
cooperation
por
in
fortalecer el
support
Estado de
of
Derecho y
regional
combatir
efforts to
el crimen
strengthen the rule
organizado
of law and
transnacional.
fight transnational
Segundo,
organized crime.
en materia de
Secondly,
frontera,
in terms of
tanto
the
el
border,
presidente
both
Obama como un
President
servidor
Obama and
coincidimos
I agree
en que debemos convertir
that we
esta zona
must
en tierra de
turn
oportunidades
this
y no de
area
conflicto.
into
El año
a
pasado
land of opportunities and
adoptamos
not
una
of conflict.
declaración
Last
sobre
year,
la
we adopted a
administración de la
declaration on the
frontera del siglo
administration of the
XXI que
21st
queremos
century border,
tanto para Estados
which we
Unidos como
want
para
both
México.
for the United
Y
States
desde
and
entonces el
Mexico. And
Comité
since then,
Ejecutivo
the
Bilateral
bilateral
encargado de su
executive committee
implementación
entrusted
ha acordado un
with
plan
that
de acción,
implementation has agreed
además de haber
to a
emitido
plan
una
of action
declaración
in addition
conjunta
to
para prevenir la
issuing
violencia
a
fronteriza
joint
que permite evitar
declaration to
trágicos
prevent border
episodios en contra
violence
de
so
nacionales
as
de uno y otro
to
país.
enable us to avoid
Tercero,
tragic events
en
such
materia de
as
migración,
those that we've seen on both
el
sides of the
presidente
border.
Obama ha
Thirdly, in
reconocido
terms of
invariablemente las
immigration, President Obama
contribuciones
has
de los
always
inmigrantes a la
recognized,
economía y a la
invariably
sociedad
recognized the
estadounidense.
contributions of immigrants
Reconozco
to
y
the
valoro
economy
en
and
toda su
society of the United
dimensión
States. And I
ampliamente su
recognize
apoyo
and
claro y
value
decidido
his
al impulso
clear
de
and
una reforma
determined
migratoria
support for
integral
the
en este
adoption
país
of a comprehensive
y
migratory
su
reform
firme
in this country,
compromiso
as
con
well
los
as
derechos
his
humanos y
firm
civiles
commitment
de las
to the
comunidades
human and civil rights
independientemente de su
of
origen.
communities,
Le he
regardless of their
expresado
point of origin.
mi
I've
preocupación
expressed
por
to
la
him my
proliferación de
concern for the
iniciativas locales
proliferation of local
contrarias
initiatives
a los
that are
intereses
against
o a los
the
derechos de las
interests of the
comunidades
rights of
inmigrantes.
immigrant
Cuarto,
communities. Fourth,
en materia de competitividad,
in terms of
México tiene
competitiveness,
una perspectiva
Mexico
regional.
has a regional perspective.
Estados Unidos y
The United States
México
and Mexico
podemos y debemos aprovechar
can
las ventajas
and must make the
comparativas
most of the
que nos
comparative
hacen
advantages
únicos
that
como
make
región
us unique
y
as
que
a
nos
region,
permitirían
and
convertir a
that would enable
Norteamérica
us to
entendida en
convert,
su
to
conjunto
turn North
como la
America
región más
in its entirety
competitiva del
into
mundo.
the
Estoy
most
convencido de que
competitive region of the
juntos
world. I
lo
am
podemos
convinced
lograr.
that together we can achieve
El
this.
Tratado de Libre Comercio de América del Norte
The North
fue un
American
gran
Free Trade
paso para integrar
Agreement was a great
comercialmente
step
a la
forward
región,
for the
generó
commercial,
cientos de
the trade
miles,
integration of the
millones, me
region.
atrevo a decir, empleos,
It
tanto en
generated
México
hundreds
como en
of
Estados
thousands,
Unidos,
even millions
y
of
estamos listos para
jobs in the United
trabajar
States and
a
in
fin de
Mexico, and we
profundizar
are ready
y
to
aprovechar
work
mejor
to
nuestros
deepen
vínculos.
and to make
Podemos
the most
complementar
of
más
this
eficientemente
relationship.
la
We must
complementariedad,
work
la abundancia
efficiently
relativa
to
de capital y
take
la fuerza
advantage
de
of the
Estados Unidos
relative
la fuerza y
abundance
la
of
competitividad
capital in the
de
United
México,
States with the
tanto a través de
labor,
mayores inversiones
manpower available
productivas
in Mexico
como
through
también el
productive
acceso
actions,
seguro,
investments in our
ordenado y
countries,
legal,
as well as the
trabajo
access that
de
is secure,
nacionales
orderly, and
en Estados
legal
Unidos y en
of
México.
national
Nuestros
workers
gobiernos,
from Mexico in
algo
the
muy
U.S.
importante
market.
para
Our
nosotros,
governments,
han llegado
something that
hoy
is very
a un
important to
acuerdo.
us, have today reached
Un
an
acuerdo
agreement,
para
an
solucionar
agreement
el
to
diferendo
solve
sobre
the
autotransporte
differences with
fronterizo de carga
respect
que
to
tenemos
cross-border
desde hace
cargo
muchos
trucking
años.
that had existed for many years.
Este, como he dicho, se ha
As
extendido
I
durante
said,
largo
this
tiempo,
has
pese a que la
existed for a long
existencia de un
time,
sistema
despite
integral
the
de
fact
transporte
that we
beneficia a
had
ambos
that
países
the
al
integrated
fortalecer
system
nuestra
for
competitividad y al generar
transportation
empleos,
existed and
y que ha
benefited
sido
both countries,
establecido desde
strengthening our
1994,
competitiveness and
cuando
generated
acordamos
jobs that
el
had
acuerdo
existed
de
since
libre comercio.
1994 when
En ese
we agreed
sentido,
on the NAFTA.
México
In
suspenderá
this sense,
en
Mexico
fases
will be
las represalias
suspended on
impuestas en materia de
phasing
aranceles
out
tras el incumplimiento de Estados Unidos del Tratado de
duty
Libre Comercio de América del
reprisals
Norte
after
y las dará por terminadas conforme avance la
non-compliance of the United
liberalización del
States of the
transporte
Free
de
Trade
carga.
Agreement of North
El
America by
objetivo
the
de mi
United States and
gobierno
will
ha
be
sido en todo
ending.
momento alcanzar una solución mutuamente aceptable en
And
este
as a
ámbito
result of this,
y hoy
will
lo
be
hemos logrado, lo
furthering
cual ha
liberalization
sido un
of
gran
cargo
resultado
transportation.
de
The
esta
objective of
reunión.
my government has always been
Quinto, en el capítulo de
to
seguridad,
reach a solution that's mutually
ambos
acceptable
gobiernos nos hemos
for
asumido
in this
como
field. And
corresponsables
fifth,
en el
in
combate a
the
la
chapter of
delincuencia
security, both
organizada
governments
transnacional.
have taken
Este es un
on
cambio
our positions
paradigmático en
as
nuestra relación.
co-responsible
Hoy
parties in
tenemos
the
niveles
fight
de
against
intercambio de
transnational
información
organized
sin
crime.
precedentes
This is a
que tienen
paradigm
sustento
change in our
en la
relationship, and
confianza
today we
mutua.
have reached
Agradezco la
increased
claridad con la que el gobierno del
levels of
presidente
exchange of
Obama ha hablado de
information
los
that are
efectos que
unheard
tienen
of in the
tanto el
past.
consumo de
I would
drogas
like to
como el
thank
tráfico
President
ilegal de
Obama for
armas
the
y de
clarity
dinero
with which he
efectivo
speaks to the effects
hacia
that the
Estados Unidos
consumption
lo
of
primero
drugs
y
has
hacia
in his
México
country,
lo
as well
segundo.
as the illegal
Sé
traffic
que juntos
of
podremos
weapons
lograr
and of
avances
monies
cada vez
into
mayores.
Mexican territory. I
De
know
hecho,
that together
el
we can
último
achieve
año ha
ever
sido
greater
el año
results.
con mayores logros
Last
en
year
la
was the
captura
year where we had the
de líderes
greatest
de las
number of
organizaciones
achievements in
criminales.
the
Un número de
capture of
capturas sin precedentes
number
que es
of
fruto, entre
criminals,
otras cosas,
unprecedented
del
number of criminals
incremento de
were
capacidad
caught, and this is the result
institucional
of the
de nuestras
increase of the
agencias como de la
institutional
cooperación
capacity of our
binacional
agencies,
en
as well
materia
as
de
international
información e
cooperation in
inteligencia.
terms of information
Valoro también
and
en toda su
intelligence.
dimensión
I
el claro
also
respaldo
truly value the
estadounidense
clear
mediante la
effort
transferencia
of the
de
United
equipo y de
States through
programas de
transfer of
capacitación
equipment and
a
training
nuestros
programs
esfuerzos
to
de
our
fortalecimiento
efforts,
institucional.
added to our
Estoy
efforts
seguro
of
que se puede avanzar mucho
institutional
más
efforts. And
en
this,
este
I am
terreno.
sure,
Gracias, Presidente, por
will
su apoyo.
further our efforts
Agradezco
tremendously.
también
And I
la
thank you
claridad
for your
con la que el
support there,
Presidente Obama
Mr.
ha
President.
reconocido
And
los
I am
grandes
also grateful for the
sacrificios
clarity with which
que ha
President
debido
Obama has
realizar la
recognized the
sociedad
great
mexicana para hacer
sacrifices
frente a
that
este
the
gran
Mexican
reto de la
society has
inseguridad
had
proveniente del
to
crimen
make
organizado
in
y
view
el narcotráfico.
of
En la
organized
lucha por la
crime and
seguridad
our fight
han
of
muerto
drug trafficking.
cientos de
In the
militares
fight
y
for the security of
miles
Mexico,
ya miembros de las fuerzas del orden en México
thousands of
que han
military
caído en el
officers and
cumplimiento de su
members of
deber.
the police force
A
have
estas
died in
lamentables
Mexico. They've
muertes
fallen
se
the
ha
line of
sumado
duty, and to
la del
these
agente Jaime
deaths
Zapata de la
we
Oficina de
add the death
Inmigración y
of
Control de
Agent
Aduanas
Jaime
de
Zapata
Estados
from
Unidos.
the
Quiero
Immigration and Customs
reiterar
Enforcement
mi más
Agency of the United
sentido
States.
pésame
And I would like to add my
a sus
deepest
familiares, al
condolences to
pueblo y al
his
gobierno de Estados
relatives,
Unidos
to the
por esta
people and
sensible
government
pérdida.
of Mexico in
Hemos
view of his death.
capturado ya a los presuntos responsables de su
Government of the
asesinato y a
United
la banda
States in
a
view
la que
of his
pertenecía.
death.
Y su
I would
muerte
like to tell
debe
you
instarnos
that
a seguir
the
trabajando juntos
suspected
para
perpetrator of
asegurar
his murder
un futuro de
and his
prosperidad
gang has
y
been arrested,
tranquilidad
and we hope to
en
bring
nuestra
them
región.
to justice. His death
Señoras y
must
señores, para
urge
mí
us to
ha sido
continue to work
una
together
muy
so as to
importante
ensure
reunión,
a prosperous
quizá más de lo que
and
ustedes
peaceful
piensan.
future for our
Hoy
region.
refrendo
Ladies and
la
gentlemen,
convicción de que
today
tenemos en el
I'd like to
presidente
say
Obama y en
that
su
I thank
equipo, en las diversas
hospitality
agencias
of President
estadounidenses,
Obama, and I would
en su
reiterate
gobierno,
my
un
trust, my
aliado,
confidence
e
in the
incluso
government
un
and
amigo
institutions
en
of
su
this
propia
country.
persona.
This country is a good
Esta
friend to
reunión
Mexico,
además
as
para
is
mí
President
representa la
Obama. This
oportunidad de
opportunity
renovar
represents for me
con fuerza
a
y
chance
con brío
to strongly
y de redoblar incluso
renew
los esfuerzos
our
para
efforts
conseguir
and
la
to
seguridad que
redouble our
queremos y que
efforts to
merecen nuestros pueblos.
accomplish the
Quiero
security
también
that our peoples
felicitar al
deserve.
presidente Obama por
At
el
the same time, I
liderazgo
would
que
like to
está
congratulate
demostrando
President Obama
en
for
el
the
problema
leadership that
que
he
a todos
has
nos
shown
preocupa en el
in the
norte
problem
de
of
África,
concern concern to all of
y
us
aportando
in
y encabezando el
North
esfuerzo
Africa heading up
responsable del
the
pueblo y el gobierno de Estados
responsible
Unidos para
efforts of the
encontrar
people
pronto
and government
soluciones
of the United
a este
States to
tema.
quickly find
Señor
solutions to
Presidente,
this
quiero
problem. Mr.
agradecerle
President,
nuevamente su
once again,
hospitalidad,
thank you ever so
la
much for your
amistad que ha
hospitality,
demostrado
the
con
friendship
México,
that
la
you have always shown to
responsabilidad que
Mexico,
ha
the
asumido su
responsibility
gobierno
that your government,
de
your
manera sin
administration
precedente en
has
los temas que
unprecedentedly taken
son
on
comunes.
in
Estoy
the
convencido,
subjects,
amigas y
the
amigos, que
issues that are
nuestra
of common
relación
interest
bilateral
to us.
no solo tiene hoy
Our
mayor incidencia en la
bilateral
vida diaria de
relationship,
los
my friends,
mexicanos
does
y
not
estadounidenses,
only have a huge
sino que
impact
hoy
on
es
the lives
abordada
of
de
Mexicans
manera
and Americans,
conjunta,
but
cada
today
vez con
it's
mayor fuerza,
taken on
con mayor
with
claridad y con mayor
increasing
coordinación
strength
entre
and
nuestros
clarity and
gobiernos. Le agradezco
coordination by both
enormemente
of our
su
governments.
compromiso
Once again, thank
personal
you for your
con la
personal
cooperación y
commitment,
la
the
corresponsabilidad.
cooperation and
Así que seguiremos trabajando
co-responsibility
juntos
of
y más
your
intensamente
government.
para
We will
lograr
continue to
la
work together
prosperidad
and
tanto del
harder
pueblo
to
mexicano
achieve
como
the
del pueblo de
prosperity
Estados
of
Unidos.
both the
Muchísimas
Mexican
gracias.
and U.S. peoples. Thank you very much.
I think we're going to take one question each. Ben Feller, AP.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have a question for both presidents, and in your case, sir, I suppose it's a classic two-parter.
With the follow-up, so make it a three-parter?
Thank you, sir. On Libya, I wanted to follow up on your comments. Colonel Gaddafi is vowing to fight till the end, and in the meantime, the people of his country are dying. Now, I know that you've admonished the press corps about impatience, and I know that the international community and the United States have taken several steps, and you've named many of those today. But I'm wondering, while this is happening, if you fear this is headed for a bloody stalemate, and more specifically, is a no-fly zone something that you're actively considering? And can you talk about what you see as your broader doctrine for military intervention in a crisis like this? The other topic is something that is quite different but does matter to millions of Americans. The National Football League is on the brink of a complete shutdown as of tonight over a labor dispute. Obviously, that's an economic issue for cities, but also something that a lot of people just care about. And I'm wondering if it's something that you'd be willing to personally intervene on, and if not, why not? President Calderón, sir, I was wondering your thoughts on an issue that's come up about potentially arming U.S. agents in Mexico. It's come up here in the U.S. Attorney General Holder has raised it as at least something that should be considered. Wondering if you will consider it and if that came up with President Obama. Thank you both.
All right. Let me deal with football first. You've got owners, most of whom are worth close to $1 billion. You've got players who are making millions of dollars. My working assumption at a time when people are having to cut back, compromise, and worry about making the mortgage and paying for their kids' college education is that the two parties should be able to work it out without the President of the United States intervening. I'm a big football fan, but I also think that for an industry that's making $9 billion a year in revenue, they can figure out how to divide it up in a sensible way and be true to their fans, who are the ones who obviously allow for all the money that they're making. So my expectation and hope is that they will resolve it without me intervening, because it turns out I've got a lot of other stuff to do. With respect to Libya, I think you asked about sort of do I have a doctrine. My approach throughout the convulsions that have swept through the Middle East is, number one, no violence against citizens. Number two, that we stand for freedom and democracy. And in the situation in Libya, what you've seen is, number one, violence against citizens and the active urging of violence against unarmed citizens by Gaddafi. And number two, you have seen with great clarity that he has lost legitimacy with his people. And so let me just be very unambiguous about this. Colonel Gaddafi needs to step down from power and leave. that is good for his country. It is good for his people. It's the right thing to do. Those around him have to understand that violence that they perpetrate against innocent civilians will be monitored and they will be held accountable for it. And so to the extent that they are making calculations in their own minds about which way history is moving, they should know history is moving against Colonel Gaddafi, and that their support for him and their willingness to carry out orders that are direct violence against citizens is something that ultimately they will be held accountable for. With respect to our willingness to engage militarily, what I've instructed the Department of Defense, as well as our State Department and all those who are involved in international affairs to examine is a full range of options. I don't want us hamstrung. I want us to be making our decisions based on what's going to be best for the Libyan people in consultation with the international community. And we are doing that not just here in the United States within our own agencies, but we're also doing it in consultation with NATO. We have already engineered the most rapid and forceful set of sanctions that have ever been applied internationally. We started unilaterally, freezing $30 billion worth of assets, imposing severe sanctions against those in the Libyan government who've been carrying out some of these crimes. And as a consequence of that leadership, what we've seen is, I think, broad-based mobilization around the international community. You are right that there is a danger of a stalemate that over time could be bloody. And that is something that we're obviously considering. So what I want to make sure of is that the United States has full capacity to act potentially rapidly if the situation deteriorated in such a way that you had a humanitarian crisis on our hands, or a situation in which defenseless civilians were finding themselves trapped and in great danger. I think it's very important for us to do this in consultation, though, with the international community. One of the extraordinary successes of Egypt was the full ownership that the Egyptian people felt for that transformation. That has served the Egyptian people well. It serves U.S. interests well. We did not see anti-American sentiment arising out of that movement in Egypt precisely because they felt that we hadn't tried to engineer or impose a particular outcome, but rather they owned it. The same is happening in Tunisia, and I think that the region will be watching carefully to make sure we're on the right side of history, but also that we are doing so as a member of the world community and being willing to act on behalf of these values, but doing so in a way that takes all the various equities into account. So just to put sort of the final point on it, we are looking at every option that's out there. In addition to the non-military actions that we've taken, I want to make sure that those full range of options are available to me. Some of them may end up being humanitarian. I mean, the biggest priority that we have right now is you've got tens of thousands of people who are gathered at the border, and we've got to make sure that they can get home. And that's why we're using some of our military aircrafts in addition to civilian aircrafts to help on that front. There may be situations in which Gaddafi is hunkered down in his compound, but the economy or food distribution systems in Tripoli, for example, start deteriorating. And we're going to have to figure out how do we potentially get food in there. So there are a whole range of options, military and non-military, that we're examining, and we'll be making these decisions based on what's best for the Libyan people and how can we make sure that we're minimizing the harm to innocent civilians during this process. throughout all this, we will continue to send the clear message that it's time for Gaddafi to go. That is one of the options that we would be looking at.
Bueno, primero, en el caso de Libia, yo
But
reconozco y
first,
aplaudo
in
el
terms of
liderazgo
Libya, I
del presidente
recognize and
Obama, como he
applaud
dicho
the efforts
antes,
undertaken by President Obama, as I
en
said
buscar una
previously,
solución acorde con el
to
derecho
seek
internacional sobre
a
este tema.
solution
Pero para
in
México es
line with
absolutamente
international law
claro.
for this
No
situation.
se puede
For
permitir
Mexico, it's absolutely
impunemente que se
clear that
masacre
we
a
cannot,
una
it's not
población
possible
civil
that
con el uso, además,
civilians
no
be
solo de la fuerza pública,
be
sino de la
massacred
aviación, armas,
and not go punished.
De uso exclusivo de guerra, y que
Using
se requiere un gran
weapons
esfuerzo
that are for the
internacional
exclusive
para
use of
detener
war.
o evitar esa masacre.
We must do everything that
De
we
hecho,
can to
México
avoid or
ha
stop that
presentado una
massacre.
iniciativa en el seno de la
Mexico,
Comisión
indeed, has
Internacional
presented
de
a
Derechos
resolution
Humanos de
within
las
the
Naciones
framework
Unidas,
of
tras la
the
cual ha
Human
sido
Rights Commission of the
sancionado
United
y
Nations,
expulsado
and
Libia
in
de tal
this,
condición,
Libya
y
has been
obviamente
sanctioned by
estamos
the Commission,
participando en la medida de
and we are, of
nuestras
course,
posibilidades en
taking
la
part
búsqueda
insofar as we are
de
able
esa
to
solución.
in the search
Creo que es
for a solution
importante
to this
hoy en
problem.
día
I believe that today
revalorar
it is
precisamente los
problem to
principios y valores de la
revalue
democracia
the
y los derechos
principles and the
humanos en cualquier
values
parte del mundo.
of
Principios
human
y
rights
valores que
anywhere in the
nosotros
world, the
reconocemos y
principles and
admiramos,
values that
presentes
we
en la
recognize and value. We have them in North America.
En cuanto al tema de la aportación de
American
armas por
society,
agentes estadounidenses,
the people,
quiero subrayar
in
en primer
terms
lugar que
of
condenamos cualquier acto de
that
violencia,
we
sea contra nacionales
condemn
mexicanos o
any
extranjeros,
act of
que
violence
arriesgan su
against
vida en la
people
lucha contra el crimen
where
organizado
people
transnacional
are
y el
risking their
narcotráfico.
lives
Damos la
in
mayor
terms of
importancia
use
a que
of
todos aquellos
weapons.
que colaboran en
We
esta
condemn
lucha tengan las
any
mejores
act of violence
condiciones
against
para
these people,
desempeñar
and
su
we
tarea,
believe that people
incluyendo
must
su
have the best
seguridad
conditions to
personal.
guarantee their work, including
contamos
their personal
en este
security.
esfuerzo con el
And in this
valioso
effort,
apoyo
I
de
know that we
diversas agencias
have the support of
del
different
Gobierno de Estados
agencies
Unidos
of the
que
government
han
of the United
aportado
States who have
enormemente a la solución
contributed
de los problemas
enormously
que
to
en común
the
estamos
solution of the
enfrentando,
problems that we
bajo el
are facing
principio de
together
responsabilidad
under the
compartida
principle of
que estamos
shared
consolidando.
responsibility that we are consolidating.
Debo aclarar, sin embargo, que
I must nonetheless clarify
hay
that
restricciones
there
legales
are
muy importantes
very
sobre este
important
tema
legal
en México, como
restrictions in
ocurre en
this
otros países,
matter in
probablemente en
Mexico,
Estados
as is
Unidos,
probably the case in other
respecto
countries, and
de
most
la
likely the United
actuación de
States,
agentes
with respect to the
extranjeros en el
actions
propio
of foreign
territorio.
agents in
Concretamente,
Mexican land.
la ley no permite que
The
agentes
law
de Estados
does
Unidos
not
o de cualquier
allow
otro
agents
país
of the United States or
participen
of
en
any other
labores
country to
de
take
procuración
part
de
in
justicia
tasks
en
involving
nuestro
justice
territorio.
enforcement in
Por
our
lo mismo, no pueden
territory.
portar armas o
As a
realizar
result, they
labores
cannot carry
operativas.
weapons or undertake
Sus funciones, de acuerdo
operational
con
tasks.
los tratados
Their
que tenemos, se
functions, in
limitan al
line with our
intercambio de
treaties, are
información y
limited
a
to
la
the
asistencia
exchange of
técnica para
information and
apoyar a las
technical
autoridades
assistance to
mexicanas
support
en estas
Mexican
tareas.
authorities
Entonces, hay una
in
restricción
these
legal
tasks. So there's an
importante,
important
pero qué duda
legal
cabe, para
restriction
mí
that exists, but it's
definitivamente
very
tenemos que
clear for
encontrar
me as well that
la
we must
manera de
find the
elevar
way
el
of
nivel de protección
enhancing the
de
level of
todos los
protection
agentes que de
of
acuerdo con la ley
any and all
actúan
agents who are
en contra
acting
de la
within
criminalidad
the framework
y
of the
desde
law
luego
against
estaremos analizando
crime.
profundamente
And of course, we are
alternativas a este
deeply
tema
analyzing
y
alternatives for
dialogando con
this
el Congreso
and
mexicano, que es, a
in
final de
dialogue with
cuentas,
the
quien
Mexican
tiene la
Congress,
última
who
palabra.
is the party that has the final word,
Bueno,
the final
finalmente sobre
say
el tema
on
del
this
fútbol
matter.
americano, pues no soy
And
un
finally, on the
experto,
issue
mi
of
esposa sí lo es.
football, I'm not an expert.
Y
My
le voy
wife
a
is, though.
consultar sobre
And
este tema,
I will
seguramente
ask her
está
about it.
muy
I'm
preocupada.
sure that she's very concerned
Pero
about the
déjeme decirles
situation.
que
But allow me to say
es muy importante para muchos
that
mexicanos. So,
football is
in
very
that
important
regard,
for many
whatever you need,
Mexicans.
with the exception of money, you can count on us. But fix that.
I will say that at the state dinner, the First Lady of Mexico seemed quite excited to see Mark Sanchez there. Yes, I don't know if that was a concern to you. But.
Actually, bueno, ella hizo ¿cómo dicen ustedes? Lanzó la moneda en un partido de los Jets. ¿no?
You've already thrown the coin, flipped the coin in a Jets game.
Perdón, Ariel Sosa, Radio Mil.
Mrs. Zapata did.
Bueno, aprovechando también y siguiendo con la temática, vamos
Taking
a
advantage
tratar
of the moment
hacer
and
muchas
continuing in the
preguntas, pero sí
subject
seré
matter, I'm not
concreto.
going to
La
ask
primera
many
es
questions, but I will be very
directamente
concrete.
con
First,
el presidente Obama.
directly for President Obama.
La segunda enmienda
The
de la
second
Constitución de los
amendment
Estados
of the
Unidos
United States
permite a los
Constitution
estadounidenses
allows
portar
American citizens
armas,
to
y
carry
ellos defienden
weapons,
este principio. Sin
and
embargo, el
this
presidente
principle
Calderón el
is
año pasado
defended.
alertó
However,
que esta
President
ley aprobada
Calderon
en el
has said
Congreso
that this
podría alcanzar incluso y
law
podría
in
volverse
Congress
contra
that
agentes estadounidenses, lo
could
cual ya
these
pasó.
this could actually
El
go
asunto
against
es,
U.S.
usted,
agents,
Obama,
and this has happened.
podría,
So,
directamente,
President
quizá,
Obama,
en México existe la figura del poder
in
del
Mexico,
veto.
we
No sé
have
hasta
the
dónde usted
veto, the
tenga
power
esa
of veto. I
capacidad
don't know how
de
far
poder-
you
de
have the
poder,
ability
echar
to
atrás esa ley que ya ha sido aprobada, y si
veto
usted tiene esa
that law that
capacidad,
has been,
usted tiene esa responsabilidad,
approved.
¿por qué no lo hace?
And if you have that
presidente?
responsibility,
¿Hasta
why don't you
cuándo,
do
se
so,
va a permitir
sir?
que se sigan asesinando
How
directamente, ya no
long
nada
are we
más
going
a
to allow
mexicanos, sino ahora directamente
Mexicans to
a
be murdered,
estadounidenses?
and
Y,
not just Mexicans, but now
sobre,
Americans as well?
La secretaria
Now, with
de
respect
Seguridad
to
Interior, la
the
señora Janet Napolitano,
Secretary of Homeland Security,
también
Janet
ha
Napolitano,
mandado una iniciativa o ha hablado
has
ante el
sent
Congreso
a
sobre la
bill or
posibilidad
spoken
de
to
que estén
Congress
armados
with respect to
estos
the
agentes
possibility
estadounidenses
of
en nuestro
allowing
país.
U.S. agents to
Eso
bear
también
arms
Presidente
in
Calderón
our
ya ha dado de
country.
alguna manera
President
respuesta, pero
Calderon has
también ha
already
dicho
answered
que
this
se
to a certain
buscarán
extent, but he's
de
also
alguna
said
manera
that
mecanismos. ¿Qué tipo de
he will be
mecanismos
searching for
se podrían
mechanisms.
encontrar
What
para
types of
que
mechanisms can be
estén a
found
salvos? Y sobre
so as to keep them safe?
quien asesinó Zapata,
And
ahora sí que
the
Zapata
people who
versus
murdered
Julián
Zapata,
Zapata,
well,
alias el Piolín, que
in
asesinó,
Mexican
presunto
terms,
asesino de Jaime
Zapata, who was the
pues ya
alleged
también, hay
murderer
información de que se ha
of
solicitado la extradición
Zapata,
de este hombre
the
para nuestro
extradition
país,
of
que
this
ya ha hablado de
man,
esto
of this
también la propia señora
alleged perpetrator,
Napolitano.
has been
¿Hasta dónde
requested.
se va a
Madam
agilizar esto,
Napolitano
presidente
has
Calderón?
mentioned
Y
this.
bueno, eso sería
President
por nuestra
Calderon,
parte.
how far are you going to go in those efforts? And there you would have my questions.
Well, the Second Amendment in this country is part of our Constitution, and the President of the United States is bound by our Constitution. So I believe in the Second Amendment. It does provide for Americans the right to bear arms for their protection, for their safety, for hunting, for a wide range of uses. That does not mean that we cannot constrain gun runners from shipping guns into Mexico. And so we believe that we can shape an enforcement strategy that slows the flow of guns into Mexico while at the same time preserving our Constitution. You asked whether I have veto power over a particular bill. I think that the challenge that we have right now is not a particular bill, but rather that we are trying to work our way through more effective enforcement mechanisms to prevent straw purchasers from buying caches of weapons, transporting them across the border. We've made progress on that front, given the authority and administrative power that we already possess. We have seen a significant increase in the number of weapons that have been confiscated. We have put more and more people behind bars for the transfer of weapons across the border into Mexico. We recognize that it's not enough and that we've got to do more. Part of that job is to enforce the laws that are already on the books more effectively. Part of it may be to provide additional tools to law enforcement so that we can prevent the shipment of these weapons across the border. But I do want to emphasize, and I emphasize this privately with President Calderón, we are very mindful that the battle President Calderón is fighting inside of Mexico is not just his battle, it's also ours. We have to take responsibility just as he's taking responsibility. And that's true with respect to guns flowing from north to south. It's true about cash flowing north to south. And so we've stepped up our enforcement and monitoring of bulk cash transfers across the border that oftentimes finance these cartels. So we're putting more and more resources into this. One of the things that I think that President Calderon and I have discussed is how we can strengthen border security on both sides so that drugs flowing north or guns and cash flowing south, that we are able at all these points to intervene, interdict in a way that doesn't, on the other hand, slow the commerce and trade that is so important between our two countries. It's a challenging task. We have a big border. We have a lot of people going back and forth. It's very important economically, but it is something that we have to continue to work on. And I just want to say to all of the people in the Mexican press that I have nothing but admiration for President Calderon in his willingness to take this on. The easy thing to do would be for him to ignore the corrosive, corrupting influence of these drug cartels within Mexico. That would be the easy thing to do. He's taking the hard path, and he's shown great courage and great risk in doing so. And the United States will support him in any ways that we can in order to help him achieve his goals, because his goals are our goals as well. And they should be the goals of the Mexican people, because the notion that you would want these drug cartels to become more and more powerful and have greater and greater influence in the political life and the economic life and the cultural life of your country, I think is something that nobody would want. With respect to arming our agents, I think President Calderon was very clear. There are laws in place in Mexico that say that our agents should not be armed. The relationship that we have is, as President Calderon described it, when it comes to our partnership, our cooperation in battling the drug cartels, our job is to help with information, it's to help with equipment, it's to help in coordination. We are in an advisory capacity. We do not carry out law enforcement activities inside of Mexico. What we can do is to make sure that our cooperation is strengthened and deepened and becomes more effective over time, and we're constantly refining how we do that in a way that is respectful of Mexico's sovereignty. And obviously I'm concerned about our own agents who are down there, and so I assure you that we will be examining all our procedures and protocols in terms of how our agents travel throughout Mexico, and we'll be working in close contact with Mexican law enforcement, who I'm sure will have important advice in terms of how we operate in that region. But this cooperation has made great progress. We expect it to continue to make more progress in the future.
Bueno, yo quiero agradecer muchísimo el apoyo que el presidente Obama ha hecho en este
President
tema de las
Obama
armas.
for
Yo no
this
he sabido
wonderful
si
support in
antes
terms
de su
of weapons.
presidencia se hace un esfuerzo similar por detener
Others have made
el flujo de
similar
armas hacia
efforts
México, pero
before
nos
his
consta
administration in terms of
que en las
deterring the
diversas
flow of
agencias que tienen
weapons
que
to
ver
Mexico,
con la
but
seguridad
we
interna de
know
Estados
that
Unidos, como en la oficina
what
del,
has to do with
del
internal
fiscal
Homeland Security
o del procurador,
and the
se están haciendo
Attorney
esfuerzos muy
General are
importantes y se han
making
atrapado incluso algunos
important
traficantes de
efforts,
armas,
and
como no se hacía tanto
we know
antes.
that even more
De
weapons
hecho,
traffickers, gun
creo que
runners have
nosotros
been
mismos tenemos
caught
mucho que mejorar
than
en
ever
términos de
before.
cómo
There's a great
compartir
deal that has to
mejor
be
la
improved in
información,
terms
cómo
of how to
rastrear
share
mejor las
information,
armas.
how to trace the weapons.
Y también reconozco el esfuerzo
And
que,
I also recognize,
a sabiendas de las
the
enormes
efforts,
restricciones que tiene
knowing
políticas
the
ilegales que
large
tiene el presidente Obama y
restrictions
su
that President
administración,
Obama and his
están
administration
haciendo
have
un
at the
esfuerzo
political
interno
level.
para
They're
que a través
making
de medidas
great efforts
administrativas podamos
internally
abordar
so
juntos
that
este
through
tema.
administrative measures
Una
we
de
can
las
broach
cosas
this
que
matter.
sugerí en nuestra
One of the
conversación, y creo
things
que
that
lo debemos
I
revisar
suggested
todavía
during our
muy
conversation, and I
cuidadosamente,
think we still have to look at this very carefully,
es si encontramos alguna manera
is
como
if we can find
para sellar
a
los
means
puntos
of
en la frontera.
sealing
dijo el presidente,
ports of entry along the
se
border,
me
as the
ocurre que a través de
President
mecanismos no intrusivos
said,
o
and
equipos no
as I
intrusivos
said,
de
through
detección,
the use of
podamos
non-intrusive
verdaderamente
mechanisms
tener
for
la
detection,
frontera segura
we
que
could
ambos
assuredly
países
have
queremos,
the
tanto los
safe and
americanos
secure
como
border
los
that
mexicanos
both
queremos tener una
nations
frontera
want, that both
segura
peoples
y
want.
pienso que eso es
We all
posible,
want to have
aunque se
a
requiere
safe
pues una
border. I
enorme
believe it's
capacidad
possible,
tecnológica
although
y
it will
financiera para
require
hacerlo,
huge
pero creo que sería
technological
una manera de
financial
poder detener
resources to
sin
achieve it.
dañar
But
los
I think
derechos
it's
de
a
los
way
americanos establecidos en la segunda enmienda,
of
de poder
ensuring
detener el
security
flujo de
without
armas y dinero
affecting the
hacia
Second
México
Amendment rights of
y el flujo de
U.S.
drogas hacia
citizens,
Estados
and at
Unidos,
the
con lo
same
cual
time
ganaríamos
stop the
ambos
flow
países, pero es algo que tenemos que
of
explorar.
drugs northbound, monies and guns southbound.
Insisto,
I
sobre
would
las restricciones legales
insist
que en
upon the
México como en
legal
otros países
restrictions
existen
that
respecto
exist in
de la
Mexico as in other
intervención y
countries
el
with respect
uso
to
de armas por parte de
the
agentes
intervention
extranjeros.
and the bearing
Pero en
of
este tema
arms
habré de
by
platicar con los
U.S.
miembros del
agents.
Congreso,
But
en
in this
particular
subject,
del
I'll have
Senado,
to speak to
para
members of
explorar
Congress,
las
and particularly the
alternativas. Y
Senate,
cuando digo las
to explore
alternativas,
different
creo que tenemos que
alternatives.
decir
And
todas las alternativas
I
que
think
la
we have
ley
to
o la
look at
Constitución nos
all
permitan.
alternatives that are
En ese
enabled to
sentido,
us
pueden
by
ser
the
desde
Constitution and the
mecanismos de
law,
protección
mechanisms of
especial,
protection, special mechanisms of
delimitación clara
protection,
de las áreas en las
clear
cuales podemos
delimitation of
colaborar.
the areas where we can collaborate.
La
For
versión de los
instance,
propios criminales es que no, para ellos
criminals
no
themselves,
sabían de que se trataba de agentes norteamericanos.
they tell us that they didn't know that they were attacking
No hay
U.S.
elementos que nos
agents
permitan afirmar que hubo una acción en
in their
contra de
attack.
agentes norteamericanos, pero en
So
cualquier
it's
caso
not that
creo que
that's
es
what
una
they
llamada de
wanted to
atención
do,
muy
but I think
importante
at any
para
rate this is still a
redoblar el
very
esfuerzo de
important
proteger o de cuidar
sign, a warning
objetivos
sign
sensibles
to all of us, where we have to be indicating that we have to be very careful
mexicanos americanos, sino
about how we care for all of our agents, not just
tenemos que tener una
Mexican,
política
American,
específica
all
mucho más
agents. So we have to have a
audaz.
specific
Y
policy
creo que en
that's much
este,
more
ya no
daring
solo
in
en
this
el tema
sense.
de las
And I
armas,
think that
sino
here,
en
not
muchos
just in
otros
terms
temas,
of
tenemos
weapons
que
and
pensar con una mente muy
guns,
abierta
we have to think
y
in a much
buscar
more
soluciones
open
mucho más
manner
creativas.
and seek much more
Creo que
creative
estamos
solutions.
viviendo
It seems to me that we are
circunstancias
experiencing
extraordinarias
extraordinary
que tienen que ser
circumstances
respondidas
that
con acciones
call
también
for
extraordinarias por
extraordinary
parte de nuestros
actions
gobiernos.
by our governments.
Respecto de la extradición
Now, with respect
de
to,
este criminal,
the
no es algo
extradition
que todavía
of
hayamos
this
conversado, no sé si lo
criminal,
quería
it's something
traer
that
a la
we
mesa
hadn't
el presidente
really
Obama, porque
discussed. I
todavía
don't know if
tenemos
President
una larga
Obama wanted to
sesión
discuss this. We still have
de encuentro,
have not
pero
finished our meetings yet.
honestamente yo estoy, independientemente de que tiene que revisarse qué es lo que la ley dice
we
respecto
have
de
to
cada caso de
review what the law
extradición,
stipulates in terms
la verdad
of
es que
extradition.
estoy tan
For each case
convencido
of
de que
it,
estos
I'm
tribunales tienen que
in
ir a la
truth very
justicia, que
convinced that
si es un tema de
these
voluntad
cases have to
política, hay
be
la plena voluntad
brought
política para que
to
este
trial.
criminal
There
sea
is the
castigado
political
con todo
will,
el peso
full
de la ley,
political will that this
independientemente de que la ley
individual
determine
be
sea en
brought
México
to
o Estados
justice with the
Unidos.
full
No
weight of the
tengo
law,
ningún reparo
whether
ni
that
ninguna objeción
be in the United States or in
si la ley lo
Mexico.
permitiera
If
respecto
the
de
law
una
allows
solicitud de
it,
extradición. Tengo que
in
reservar mi
terms
propia
of a
opinión
request for extradition,
definitiva
I'd have to
porque
reserve my
dependerá de
opinion
lo
in
que la
this
ley
sense
dice,
because
pero
it will depend on what the law
por
stipulates
supuesto
in
que hay
this
la
sense.
voluntad política de
Of
cooperar
course,
en ese y
there
en
is
muchos
a
otros
political
temas.
will to cooperate in this matter as well as on many others.
I didn't comment on the extradition issue. Let me just emphasize, we have made a request for extradition. I think beyond that, it's probably not appropriate to comment. Okay? But we expect the full weight of the law to be brought against this perpetrator. Thank you very much, everybody.
Anything on the budget, Mr. President?
Thank you.